Welcome back. The panel is joining us from their remote locations. We are practicing our social distancing. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, the former Republican governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, and Helene Cooper, Pentagon correspondent for the New York Times. All right, I think we can best sum up the argument or the debate this morning in particular, which is who's in charge. And Casey Hunt, I want to play the president on those CDC mask guidelines, because in many ways, the mixed messaging he sent here sort of sums up this sort of back and forth between the feds and the state. Take a listen.
The CDC is advising the use of non-medical cloth face covering as an additional voluntary public health measure. So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. I don't think I'm going to be doing it. I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself.
It's worth noting, by the way, that the Italian prime minister, before he started the interview, before he sat down, he actually was wearing a mask. There were all of his aides were wearing masks. We thought that was interesting there. But Casey Hunt, this seems to be this push and pull here. The governors want the feds to take more control, and the president definitely doesn't want to do that.
And even Asa Hutchinson, in your conversation there, he's resisted that statewide stay-at-home order, as you pointed out. But he also said in that interview he was going to be wearing a mask and modeling the guidelines. The Surgeon General, just a minute earlier, putting a face mask on camera. Clearly, our public health officials believe that this is a message that they want to send to people in the strongest possible terms. And this is, of course, an evolution. We were initially all told this wasn't necessary unless you were sick. But at this point, you know, what the president is saying, Chuck, we're seeing it in any polling that's being done. We're seeing it in how people are responding. More people are listening to what this president has to say than have at all yet in his presidency, because we are all tuned in trying to figure out how to make our way through this together. And so if he wants Americans to wear masks, he needs to say that very directly. And we all know, especially those of us who are trying to raise children, that you have to model the behavior yourself to convince others to follow.
That's for sure. Pat McCrory, as a former governor, as a former mayor, I know you're sympathetic to somebody above your pay grade trying to tell you how to run your state or run your city. I get that. But when is the point as a governor that you actually want the feds in charge?
Well, one thing, I've been in the fog of war during hurricanes and tornadoes and winter storms where you're making life and death decisions while balancing the economy and also balancing the turf between not just the federal government and state government, but if I think you examine every state, there's turf among the county health directors and the governor. And as you get closer to the people and the elected officials are closer to the people, there can be varying opinions. And in the fog of war, you have mixed data, you have mixed communication, and you have evolving opinions based upon that new data. And that's exactly what's happening today. The one thing I don't like that's happening is the blame game. You know, the Washington governor mentioned Pearl Harbor. Well, I think after Pearl Harbor occurred, the worst thing a governor could do is blame Franklin Roosevelt for Pearl Harbor. What you need to do is go, what do we need to do now? And be specific. And we all live in our lanes of responsibility, and some of those lanes overlap, and they're gray areas. And this is not unusual in a fog of war.
I'm just curious, though, Governor, I want to follow up. I'm obsessed. I put that quote up for the Surgeon General, the public health official from Ohio, Amy Acton. Are you surprised that more politicians aren't erring on the side of caution here? Because there seems to be, if you're wrong about this, boy, is that a bad way to be wrong. If you're wrong and you've been overly alarmist, well, nobody extra has died. But if you're wrong and you've underplayed, boy, you've got a lot to answer for.
I had a theme during our crisis and hurricanes was be over-prepared and hopefully be underwhelmed. And that, I think, should be the goal of every leader. But there is this tremendous balance that we all have. And one thing about even the stay-at-home policy, I could say it almost discriminates against the blue-collar worker who's watching us do our job from a long distance. The blue-collar worker can't stay at home to keep the manufacturing lines open of textile and rubber and cloth that we need in our hospitals right now. The delivery trucks, the grocery stores, the blue-collar worker is going, wait a minute, I don't get to stay at home.
Helene Cooper, there's been a lot of chatter about the president ought to appoint ought to deputize, maybe it's a member of the Joint Chiefs, a general of maybe, somebody of the status of a Jim Mattis, somebody like that, to basically become the procurement czar here?
There has been a lot of that. And as you know, at the Pentagon, the reason people are saying to do this, to appoint a general, is at the Pentagon, they specialize in planning. That's what they do all the time and in a wartime situation. It's just been so fascinating, though, Chuck, seeing the American government response to this and just how much we have appeared to lag by a good 10 days to 2 weeks, this virus, with everything that we're doing. The fact that you have the administration, the White House finally coming on and saying that we should be wearing face masks is something that many health officials say should have happened a month ago. And the fact that you still don't have the president on board with that, I think, is hugely significant. I'm not sure which kings and queens he thinks are going to be coming to the White House that he needs to be worried about greeting with a face mask on. But the very idea that President Trump is talking about appearance, that it won't look good for him to be seen wearing a face mask at a time when you have thousands upon thousands of Americans dying, and so the numbers looking like they're about to go shockingly higher, I think says a lot about leadership in a time of crisis.
Very quickly, Casey Hunt, I noticed we have 6.6 unemployment claims this week, and it seems like that number made Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell suddenly say, oh, we should agree on the next round of spending. This is coming soon, isn't it?
Nancy Pelosi earlier this week, Chuck, was ready to start talking about infrastructure projects, jobs bills, essentially, the next phase of this. It only took 24 to 36 hours for her to suddenly turn around and say, you know what, actually, we are still in the emergency relief phase of this. And I think you are going to see Congress try to act as quickly as possible in that vein.
Yep, and it almost will be like a refill the coffers of what was promised with the first round, which we're still trying to get out. Those small business loans, unemployment. All week long, you're going to see a lot of technical problems on that front. I hope folks are patient on there. Hello from Washington, I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe, and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.